Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second part of the demo for our chunky chain. In this video we are going to solder the jump rings to assemble the chain. In the previous episode we divided up our jump rings into two piles, one of closed links and one of open links. To be more efficient, we'll solder first all the jump rings that we closed. This is your setup for soldering. A brick or charcoal block, some flux. Here I'm using borax flux mixed with distilled water, hard solder, which we'll use for the entire project. I have already cut small pieces or paillons of solder, solder pick, and several fire tweezers and a third hand for holding your workpiece safely. We are going to solder all the closed links individually first, and I'm going to show you two different methods. Try them both and choose what works best for you. So place your closed links on your brick, apply flux on the seam, dry the flux with the torch a little bit, and place a small paillon of solder right on top of the seam. Heat up the base and the sides of the jump ring first and stay away from the seam. The whole piece, except the seam, needs to be evenly warmed up first, and flux is a good indicator. It tells you when it is warm enough, and that's when it's getting darker. At that point, move the flame closer to the seam and keep warming up the rest of the piece, and the solder flows soon after. Turn the link over and check that the solder has gone all the way through the seam on both sides. The second soldering method requires a pick. Pick soldering is what I would recommend because it tends to be a bit cleaner. You can line up several closed links on your brick or charcoal, and with practice you'll be able to solder several links one after another fairly quickly. To pick solder, you will follow these steps. Flux the seam of your jump ring, take a paillon of hard solder, dip it into flux and place it on your brick. And now you will heat up at the same time both the piece of solder and the tip of your pick until the solder melts into a ball and the pick turns red hot. When the pick turns red hot, pick up the ball of melted solder and go to the jump ring. Heat up the entire jump ring evenly and touch the seam to drop the ball of solder into it. And you must keep the flame on it until the solder has gone through the seam on both sides. Turn the link over, check, pull the solder through the seam with your torch if needed. Okay, let's solder another jump ring. And remember the steps. Flux the seam and heat up both the solder and the pick. So here's a little paillon of hard solder, the pick, and you heat up both of them. They must be very close to each other. And when the pick is red hot, pick up the melted solder, go to the link, heat up the link, and when it's hot enough, you touch the seam with the pick to drop the ball of solder and get it to flow into the seam. And you can turn the jump ring over to check it has gone all the way through. and repeat the process until all your closed links are soldered. Now, for the next step, we are going to solder a unit of 3 links. Take 2 soldered links and put them in an open link, and then you will close that link using 2 pairs of pliers and use a back and forth motion as we saw earlier. Make sure the seam is very tight, as solder will not fill the gap. So we can see here that we have a tight seam and it's perfectly lined up. Both sides are lined up. Okay, this is how you set up for soldering a unit of 3 links. Hold the link to be soldered with just the tip of a third hand, not too close to the seam. Use the same pick soldering method as before. And just be careful when heating up this link not to direct the flame to the soldered links to avoid melting the solder. So you'll be heating up the sides, not the bottom of or the base of the link. So it's done. Now you can connect all your units of 3 with an open link and pick solder again, and this way you can build your chain more efficiently. So soldering single closed links first, then making units of 3, and then connecting all these units of 3. It helps the process a little bit. Now, to connect units of 3, just like before for a single unit, hold the link to be soldered with a third hand, being careful to use only the very tip of the fire tweezers, not too close to the seam to avoid creating a heat sink. And you'll follow the same steps as before to pick solder the connecting link. Just watch these soldered links. Don't put the flame directly on them. Here you see that I'm going back and forth, heating up the sides and making sure they are evenly heated up. So that's it. Now we have 7 links. It's starting to look a little bit more like a chain. So you'll keep adding links until you reach the desired length for your bracelet. And this is my soldered chain. It measures 18 centimeters at this point. After I add the clasp and some smaller connecting links, the total length should come to about 20 centimeters. So that's all for now. Come back for the next demo to learn how to make the toggle clasp and polish the chain. And thanks for watching.